Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Interact podcast. My name is Josh Haynam. I am the co founder and CEO at Interact. Today, I am joined by Charlotte Grimmel, who is the founder at The Mind Friend. She's got some really cool quizzes set up, but I'm also curious to hear from her why quizzes, because she's got a psychology background, lots and lots of great content. And so it's really interesting. And the reason why I asked you on, Charlotte, is to see why this idea came up for you, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So thanks for being here, first of all. I appreciate it.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So give us some background. Like, you have a lot of great content. I think I found you through Instagram, and then I saw that you had a quiz with us. And I was generally just wondering, like, okay, you've got all this great content on Instagram, and where did the quiz idea come from? How did that come about? And why did you decide to work that into your content? And also, the way that you've worked it into your content, I think, is really cool, like incorporating it into your posting strategy. Um, yeah, tell us about all that.
Absolutely. I think just for very brief context, I think the content that you're referring to is sort of content about where psychology and business meet. So I post sort of at the intersection, I think, of like how psychology applies to business, specifically entrepreneurship or even solopreneurship. And that's kind of the scene. And I think that, using Instagram as a marketing tool and using Instagram as a platform, which is what I do, and that's how people find me to work with me, to buy any of my programs, any of that. Um, I think something that I always kind of came up against was like, the principle of like, obviously, you want to find a way for people to opt into something, to have a freebie, to kind of come into your world off the platform. And I always came up against this idea of like guides or like step by steps or like checklists or anything like that, because in the context of my work, like it's so much more nuanced than that. Because again, if we think about psychology and how that interacts with what you're doing, it's never as simple as the steps are XYZ. And so I think what the quiz, or once I then started learning about quizzes, what that opened up is just the ability to make it more personalized, right? So that's what I really love about the fact that you can take a quiz and then depending on what people answer, you can give multiple directions, insights, etc. So it kind of opened up the door of like it's not just me prescribing like here's the ultimate guide to do X, Y, and Z, but here's a quiz so that I can help analyze you and then we can do something with that. So I think that's why quizzes were interesting to me. I think the reason quizzes are interesting to people in general is because they're just a little more interactive than, reading something. Like you can kind of click your way through. Everybody wants to have a little bit of knowledge about themselves. I mean, this takes us back to like back in the day. Remember on Facebook when it was like, what's your whatever, what animal are you or something, it would be something completely random, but it's like fun to do. And so it's that interactive fun component. I think that quizzes really bring that a guide or many other freebies can't bring. Yeah, who doesn't want to like be like, oh, maybe there is something in this that I can like learn something else about myself or whatever it is. So I think that's the draw for quizzes as a whole.
Yeah, and I mean, we were there. We've been around since 2013, so we were there when it was just like this ridiculous stuff on Facebook. I remember, I won't call anybody out brand wise, but like there were some just silly quizzes that had literally millions of quiz takers. Um, but it's different now, and yours is definitely different. Like yours is not just like, oh, find out whatever blank you are. It's got a lot more depth to it. And that's something that I think people are still kind of getting used to. Like, there's a lot
Mm.
of perception now of like, oh, well, quiz will cheapen my brand. That's going to make me look like I'm just doing silly Facebook stuff. Tell us about like what actually went into formulating your quiz, because I think that kind of busts that myth. Because like, at least from taking it, it's very clear that a lot of thought went into it.
Appreciate that. And you're right, it did. I think, and to I guess to the people who are like, oh, I don't want to like whatever cheapen my brand or Facebook esque. I think it's like anything, like what you put in, you'll get out. And there's
Mm.
so much room within quizzes to, yeah, to really, really add depth and value. I think the way I did it was so mine is in the context of self sabotage. So it kind of takes like common mechanisms, let's say, and I mean symptoms, like what we experience, and it tries to put that into the broader context of what's going on in the background, rather than just being like, let me slap a time management thing on your procrastination. It's more like, let's explore a bit more of the deeper drivers behind that. So I think like self-sabotage, you could be like, okay, well, we could already speak 10 hours about what that might be and how it could look. So I kind of just went like, okay, what are the most common forms that I know of, but also that I see with the people that I see in my world, or that I like to work with. And then I can't kind of narrowed it down to like, what results do I want to be speaking to? And then from there, the questions kind of, I don't know, made themselves available. Like, and that could be anything from, I have had clients say this to me, and then I'm like, what are the alternatives to that if this was a different sort of persona? Or anything from, this is just what we know about, like, say, a typical procrastinator. What does that look like for them? And then I want to say 9 or 11 questions. I actually don't know. I do think it's definitely an uneven number. I don't know. There's something about that stuck from like even like surveys in psychology where you're like, uneven numbers are better. So that's kind of it. And it was definitely, the hardest part was narrowing it down, hey, because you kind of like, you could be like, let me ask these people 50 questions and then nobody's going to finish it. So I think that was the hardest part, was just narrowing it down.
How did you narrow it down?
I mean, kind of bang for buck is like kind of what I want to say, which might not make sense, but kind of being like, okay, which one's going to land the hardest? Which one's going to be the most easy to recognize for somebody?
Mm.
Multiple might have been already a little too deep in thinking that they already know, maybe that there's fear of failure involved or whatever. So I stripped away anything that wasn't solely symptom based, and then gave them, you've taken it, so you would have seen what the results page looked like, right? And so the results page is really where where I can bring my magic in the sense of like, let me give you the deeper layer and explain to you how this might be connected to something else that you haven't been addressing. And then that kind of gave me the space to move a lot of that into more of the results page rather than the questions.
Mm. And you don't have to go too deep into the logic behind it. We won't, you know, reveal everything, but roughly, how does it go from the questions to the results? Like, what's the logic on the back end?
Ooh, I'm not sure how to. I mean, I'm not sure how to, every question, I'm just like, this is going to be so silly. Every question has 4 options, and then I've scrambled them around. Or do you mean the
Hmm.
progression between questions? I don't think there's a progression between questions, really, when I think back. I created this like half a year ago, but I don't think there's a progression that I like logically constructed. I was just like, it's probably some approach to how they work, then there's some approach to, you know, how they feel about it, kind of thing. I do know that the last 2 questions for sure, I tied less to like wanting to analyze them and more to like, I want to have this insight about them. So maybe that's something that people could take away. So like the last 2 questions, if I'm remembering correctly, are like, this is really good market research for me to know how people might respond to that. So sort of, where are you getting most stuck, like areas of, or areas of mindset kind of thing, because then I know if I take this back as like an ecosystem into my work and my content, I'm like, I can speak more about that and more people are going to resonate with that, because the quiz has told me, I'm making these stats up, but let's say the quiz has told me like 70% of people want topic X, then I'm like, great, I can like recycle that and sort of use it for market research as well.
I like that a lot. I mean, being able to pull in information about what people want. I mean, it's so hard to figure out what people want, especially at like a scale. Like one
Mm.
off, it's a little easier. Like you talk to somebody like, oh, this is what this person wants, but you can't like necessarily address everything that every single person wants. So then being able to put it in aggregate like that, I would imagine is helpful in driving your content strategy moving forward.
Mm. For sure. I think it gives great insight, even just right, like even outside of those questions, just what personas are showing up the most, like that, or
Hmm.
so let's say, right, if I was to break it down to the most basic things, like one is procrastination, one is perfectionism, one is overthinking, right? Like these things. So then I see if 70% are ending up being in procrastination bucket, I can speak a lot more about that because I know the people are there, because the only like, and then they're going to engage with that, right? It's kind of like, the people who take my quiz came through majority of the time my Instagram. So I know that they're
Hmm.
there. And so then I know if I'm speaking about procrastination, they're probably going to be like, oh, this is me, which gives me great insight.
How did you know, like, to be able to break it down to those different outcomes, like the procrastination, example, like, how did you know, like, you could pare it down to a few without, like, leaving a bunch of people out? Like, how did you do that?
Do you know what? I think I did leave a bunch of people out like that, like, and I still get messages from people who are like, I tried to take your quiz, but there needs to be an option that's like none of these. And I'm like, all right, well, this is like the curse of, yeah, trying to create something that does work for most people, but not all people, right? So I think I really went with what do I see most commonly that people underestimate. So, right, like, or that people address in different ways. So let's take procrastination as a prime example. A lot of people try to address that with like, I'm going to get a new planner and I'm going to make this like crazy time management system and all these things. But then they kind of like come up against it. And I mean, for some people it works, right? Don't get me wrong. But for a lot of people it doesn't. And then they get angry at themselves and they're like, ugh, I'm so lazy. I'm so whatever, whatever, whatever. But they've never actually addressed the deeper layers. So I think it really came from what are the most common ones. But I 100% did leave a lot of people out. So as much as this offered nuance, again, we're in the realm of psychology where literally the answer is always it depends entirely on the person that you're speaking to. So yeah, I constantly get messages from people who are like, why is there no option for this? And I'm like, because it's not, I can't, I can't infinitely personalize this.
How has that been? Like, has it been beneficial where it's like, oh, I'm gonna focus on these personas? Has it had drawbacks where it's like you're losing people that you would want to work with? Like, what's that experience been like?
I, I don't think that it's had drawbacks in the sense of them like losing people. I think if anything, it has clear. So this quiz is a funnel or starts a funnel that leads into one of my courses that is
Hmm.
specifically geared towards those most common ones. And I think because of in my content, I still have the option to speak about other things, but then I just don't tie it to the quiz. So let's say, for example, imposter syndrome is something that comes up very, very frequently with clients of mine and in my world, but it's not addressed by the quiz. Like the quiz doesn't speak to it at all. Um, and I don't think that people who take the quiz but don't recognize themselves in it, like then go like, well, now her entire work isn't for me. It's just that that quiz wasn't, and that's why I respond when they message me. I say, great, then you're not stuck in these ways, like wonderful. Like, what is it that is keeping like, what is the option? And then I can kind of start a conversation from there versus losing them, I suppose.
That's interesting. Do you think that most people that have like a negative emotional reaction, I don't know if I would call it negative. What would you call it? Like when they don't get their right result or something that resonates with them, what emotion are they having? Is it anger? What is it?
I honestly think it can come from so many places. I think for some people, it really comes from a really like almost well-meaning place where they're like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know that like you're not seeing something, like I'm not seeing my genuinely like I like your stuff and I want it to be better," kind of sense. And then there are some people who are just like, "This is a shitty quiz. It's not doing what like it's like." But these are the same people that like, sorry, these are the same people that like will comment on anything on social media and be like, yeah, but not in this one situation. And you're like, well, it's social media. Like it can't ever possibly apply to every single situation. It's not a thing. And so if you're losing those people, I'm going to say good riddance. If it's the well-meaning or the maybe confused emotion around like, I don't really know what to make of this because I don't see myself in this, like there's almost a layer to like, am I normal? And then I can start a conversation with them if that's where they're reaching out from. If they're reaching out from the yeah, but not then I'm like, you know what? If it's not for you, it's not for you. And you can also just exit this corner of the internet and we're going to be okay.
Yeah, right, right. Do you think that the quiz in general, whether people resonate with their result or they don't, do you do you think or has your experience been that it elicits an emotional reaction from people?
I do think so that honestly, I'll give you even just by the fact that people finish it. So I could put the same information in a guide, but the likelihood that people finish reading it or going through, making the connections themselves or whatever is far, far lower. So I do think that the quiz has a higher likelihood of eliciting some kind of emotion, especially the kind of quiz where I'm like, I've now psychoanalyzed you in a way. Like I've gotten loads of messages from people like, oh my God, it's creepy. Like creepy, right? It's like stop, like get out of my head kind of, right? Like stuff like that. So yes, whether that emotion is to some degree maybe surprise, but also a degree of, feeling seen and feeling validated. I think those are things that quiz can do that a guide might not do the same way, or
Why do
insert
you
any other freebie.
why do you think that is? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but like it's the same information, right? Like it's the same information that would be on the guide, just like in a different format. So why do you think that when it's in the quiz format, it elicits this like emotional reaction that gets people to actually like pay attention and engage, which is like so freaking hard to do on the internet, versus the same information in like a PDF doesn't do that. Like just off the cuff, like I don't know the answer to this either, but like why do you think?
I think it comes back to the interaction a lot, and like the engagement that is required. I also think there's, a, a, there's no room to leave it for another day, if that makes sense. So the guide I can download, I can start reading it and then be like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't have the time, and I can like leave it for another day and forget about it forever. The quiz, right? I see my progress. I actually don't know if I see my progress, but like I know there's going to be like X amount of questions, or I've been like, I think I say before they start, like you'll have your results in 90 seconds. So like I know exactly how long this is going to take me. I know where I'm getting. So I have insight into the progress that I don't, I think, with a guide in the same way. And it's kind of like a game. Like when you think about gamification, right? It's like that interactive element and the promise of a result and the progress, all that combined makes that a lot more truly engaging and thus maybe emotionally compelling than, let's say, a guide. And that's, yeah, I think you and I agree. Like, this is not to say that guides are, you know, should all be burnt and can't work at all. It's just like, I think a lot harder to make it as digestible and as interesting for somebody to actually complete it.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a place for all these things, and oftentimes I'll steer people away from doing a quiz. They're convinced that they need it, and then, we'll talk through what they're doing, and it's like, I think it's actually probably better off as like a long form piece because there's just way too much nuance to put into a quiz
Mm.
format. Um, but a couple of things that you said there were really interesting to me, like the fact that up front I will put in 90 seconds and get an answer. That to me, I think is one to key in on because like there's so many things in life in general where that's not the case, right? Like it's a long-term process. You don't know exactly when you'll get what you want, basically. Like it takes time and it's a process. It's many, many weeks or months or years or whatever. So the idea that, oh, I can put in 90 seconds and get what I want, and there's that element of like surprise or like curiosity, like which one will I get at the end? It's like a slot machine or something, right? And so that's like also a fun element. So those are two really interesting ones that I hadn't heard framed that way. So thanks. It's helpful. It's helpful.
Pleasure. I was
Um,
just thinking of another one actually. Just, and I don't know if it really relates to this, but like there's something called the IKEA effect, which everybody knows IKEA, right? Like where something becomes
oh
more
yeah.
valuable because you built it. So that's the effect where it's like it's really just a few pieces of wood, but then you build it and it becomes a cupboard and you're like, this is the greatest thing that's ever existed. Like I'm exaggerating, obviously, but like it increases in value because you have put effort into creating it. So there's almost something around like if I've gone through the quote unquote, even if it's a 90-second effort, but I've like put in the 11 questions work of reflection, of answering, picking, clicking, where at the end I arrive somewhere, it almost, I mean, again, this is not scientifically founded or founded on any studies, but like it's worth a guess. Like, does then the result become more valuable, right? I have more skin in the game, becomes more interesting. Like, I kind of built it myself effect because I know that I've had to answer these questions in a certain way to arrive where I'm arriving. And if I've answered a different way, I would have arrived somewhere else. So there's something maybe about that as well.
That is it. Has anyone studied that, or is that just like an anecdotal thing? Like people say the
Has anyone
IKEA
studied that
effect.
in the context of quizzes? No. Has anyone studied that in the
Yeah,
context of real things? Yes. Yeah, it's a thing.
yeah.
Mm,
Like there is actual research showing like you feel a greater degree of satisfaction if you build something yourself.
yep. Because people were
Okay.
wondering, like, and there's also something around, like, basically, this is not the same effect, but, and I'm going to probably butcher this, and some psychologist listening to this is going to be like, no. But there's something around sort of, you gift me a cup or I buy a cup for X amount, but then I use it and it's like mine and whatever. And then if you ask me to sell it, even shortly after, I will want more for it. It's like because it's become valuable to me.
Hmm.
That's not the same effect, but like there's stuff like this where like my involvement, my personal involvement in something makes it more valuable.
No, yeah, I mean, like, I just think about the people that like are not very good at art, and then they're so proud of it because they made it themselves, and you're like, well, it's not
Yeah,
very good. But to you, it's very valuable because you made it, and like you
totally.
use your involvement, like you said, to actually create the thing. That is really interesting. I think that have you found I haven't, but like have you found anything else that kind of comes close to that in terms of content creation or like marketing tools? Because most stuff is like speaking to an audience. It's like
Mm.
we're telling something and I don't know that anything else has really captured that IKEA effect, the user involvement effect, um, as effectively.
I agree, especially if we're talking like in the use of freebies, right? Like I think there are obviously ways you can create communities, you can ask questions on your polls, or you write your story, use your stories to interact, create closed stories, whatever, all these things where you get people involved, and then in answering their questions or getting them to ask questions, it's kind of the same effect. But if you're trying to get them off the platform versus keeping them there, I think that there isn't anything that comes as close in terms of involving them. I do think there's things that come close in like, uh, I guess, emotional response maybe, or hard hitting, like the nuance perspective. So I've been very, very interested in seeing the uprise in like private podcasts recently, where it's like,
Hmm.
it's not a podcast for everybody, but it's just like a freebie, and it speaks to a specific person of my audience, and it's like I'm having a conversation with them. But you're right, it's still just the one-way street, right? It's still you talking to them, at them, and they don't get the chance to respond how they want to proceed in the episode the way that they get in the quiz. So yeah, I think it's really high, up there in terms of engagement for the person taking it, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing, like either a private podcast or moving into some sort of webinar experience that's live, like not pre-recorded. That's the other thing that I've heard over and over again is working. And I have a bias in my research set because I'm talking to people that do use quizzes, but that's the other thing that they use that has been successful is
Mm,
some sort of like I'm speaking at length to a set audience. This is not going to be for everyone. It's like specifically if this is something that you're interested in. So that is really interesting. One thing that you said there, moving people off the platform, I think that's something also to key in on because like it's so hard. Like most things, right? Like they'll tank your reach if you have a link in things. They'll tank
mm,
your reach if you're telling people to go to a link in bio, whatever. Um, Quizzes seem to be kind of skirting around that by using the ManyChat automation, which increases your comments and gets people involved. Still moves them off the platform, but seems to kind of fly under the radar on that like lower reach if you're trying to push people off the platform. Is that something that you've seen?
I mean, I definitely think there's a point for quiz. I do think that ManyChat has kind of solved this for other things as well. Like if I'm promoting a guide or something and I just say comment guide, it also
Hmm.
works. I do think that quizzes are more interesting for people. Again, I think there's less
Hmm.
fatigue around maybe PDFs or whatever. So it's like I find that generally more people are opting into the quiz. But I think the other thing that the quiz, or specifically try interact the way you can set it up there, have going for it is the fact that, and this is again where we could speak about maybe the IKEA effect or the involvement that's already been had, right? That the fact that the email address is asked when they've already invested.
Hmm.
versus if I'm opting into a guide, right? I give my email address first so that I can get it. And I think there's a difference in, again, I've not done my analytics comparison on these things, but I would, just as a feeling, as a gut feel, I have a sense that there's a difference in the conversion of like how many emails I end up getting from who landed on the landing page, the opt-in page for my guide versus who started taking the quiz, because the completion rate's quite high. And then of course I'm not gonna not like, I want to know my results, right? So, and that's then what I give my email for, and so much more specific than a guide that might sound nice or whatever it is. But like, I need to give my email first before I know if this is like useful at all, kind of thing. Like that, I think that's where they really, really strongly differ.
Yeah, yeah, like the experience after the fact, right? Like, I think that's kind of what you're saying is
Yeah.
what's the experience once you do click through. And yeah, I like ManyChat a lot. What is your full tech stack, if you don't mind sharing with us, like website, email, automation tools, all that kind of stuff?
Sure. Website is Show It. Then email is Flowdesk. I use Try Interact for my quiz. ManyChat for Instagram automations. I do use Stan as well, so I have Show It, but
Mhm.
because so much of my so much of my audience lives directly on Instagram, Stan is just the easier way to get them directly to opt in or purchase. I use Zapier for like other automations, kind of thing. What else? And then they're like, I mean, editing stuff like Canva and like, things to like
Yeah,
edit posts.
yeah,
But like, I think that's kind of the bulk of the tech stack. So not even
nice.
that big of a tech stack. I think this is the other thing that it's, you don't need that many things to like get a good funnel going at all. I could even
No,
reduce that.
no,
In principle, I could send emails with Snan versus Flowdesk. Like
right.
I could even strip away if I wanted to, but I just really like Flowdesk.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I like to ask that question, because it's like, everybody thinks that the starting point, maybe it's less this way now, but it used to be that everybody thinks the starting point is to buy a whole suite of tools and then like figure out how to stitch them together. But then you get stuck in like tool setup hell forever, and you never get the stuff launched.
If anybody, just like as a quick plug, if anybody is feeling that there is one guide that I have that's literally like, this is the tech stack and this is like the fundamentals that you need. So if anybody wants to get that, it's on my Instagram, because I do think that that's a rut that a lot of people get stuck in, where it's like the trying to figure it all out and trying to stitch it all together. Or I have a super all-in-one platform that's like costing me too much, and also like overwhelming my brain with everything that I should be doing versus just giving me a clear starting point. So I do think that if you're finding yourself in a space where you're like, but all the tech, strip it down, keep it simple, get going, and then keep adding on. Like, it's not, yeah, don't make that the
Yeah, that's
barrier.
That's really great advice. Yeah, send that over and we'll add it in the show notes so people can go to that directly, because it is it is an unnecessary barrier. I think a lot of the times it's like it's a almost a distraction away from like really doing the work of building an audience, getting people to engage and connect with something that you are saying. Which there's no tech that will help you do that, at least in our experience.
No, there, like, that's so true. It's like, you're not, no matter what tech you have, you're not going to get around the fact that you're going to have to do the showing up and the thinking and the, you know, producing of offers or whatever it is. Like, you're not going to get around that fact. It doesn't matter how you're going to deliver it.
No, and figuring out like what people want. Like there's this, I don't know, kind of magical thing of figuring out of like, okay, what am I good at? What am I talking about? What am I skilled in? And how does that match up with what is on the mind, or what are people thinking about? What are they seeking solutions for? What do they want? And like slowly chipping away at that. I don't think there's any way to get around that.
Especially then understanding how they speak about it, right? Like, that's only ever going to happen in the interaction, because even if you, whatever, do some crazy market research where you're figuring out like X amount of people struggle with this, but you probably have different language for that, and you're gonna have to interact with them to figure out how they call that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, and like ChatGPT could tell you what your audience is struggling with, but it will say it in ChatGPT words, which is not gonna it's not gonna like get people to move. Like, they might be like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, that makes sense, but like it's not gonna elicit a response, which I think is like really what you need, right? Like you need people to do something. You don't need them to just look at something and be like, yeah, sure, that's accurate. Um, yeah, and that's that. I think without that, the quiz, the website, the emails, none of it does anything. You have to have
Mm,
that as the starting point.
yeah. You have to wait, have
Yeah.
the, that's the, right? You have to have a way to hook them in. And if that's not emotionally compelling language, because ChatGPT said it in ChatGPT speak, then yeah, I might even find it mildly interesting, but I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is something I need or want to know more about or am inspired by or whatever it is. I'm not going to have a response.
Yeah. What is your process for like identifying that emotionally compelling language, the hooks, if you will? That's what everybody calls it. Um, like, how do
I
you
mean, it's
go
so true,
from?
right? Like like most of my profile is literally built on carousels, so I've just somehow like found that as my thing. But the entire carousel, right? And I still experiment with this. This is the thing, like I don't have the process, right? But I could post the same carousel with two different hooks, and one might go insanely viral, and one might do like blips. And it's like it really is like as annoying as it is because like we could argue about this for days, right? Because like why is it that our attention spans are so low now and whatever, but it's so true. I think the issue that I've always had is that it forces you to be so absolute in your statements and so like polarizing
Hmm,
things always do really well, right? If you go like really like it is this way or no way kind of thing, if that's the structure to it, like you could become very absolute in the statement, like this is what's
hmm,
missing from whatever, for example, right?
hmm.
You're doing it wrong if you're not whatever, for example.
Yeah.
um and it's like the psychologist in me is like every fiber of my being is like that's absolutely not true and I don't know enough about their situation to make a statement like that. So it's definitely been a journey for me across the like years of producing content where I can kind of separate like content land from real world land, and I really like can lean in more into the simplification of it. It's like, okay, I'm gonna like make a really simple statement, but at least because I have a carousel or if I do a reel, I have the back end of that to bring the nuance back in. That didn't really answer your questions about my process, but I think my process really is um I have like a I have a set of just experience, right? I keep all my content in an Airtable so I can go back and kind of be like, what went well, what didn't go well, how else might I say that? I do always pay attention to hooks that are doing really well for other creators. So like I absolutely keep an eye on it. I think that not in a compare yourself to other people, but just in like this is like keep an eye on what's working right now. Because again, like I might put the same content of a carousel, but just put a different hook on it because right now this is the kind of hook structure that seems to be really exploding everywhere. Like that's okay. Like don't be too, I don't know, too precious to do that, I think either. And so it's a bit of a mix, I think, of like keeping an eye on what's happening out there, having my own stuff already, having the insight, like again, the my own gained insight of like what has worked really well on my profile and how might I be able to apply the same structure to something else. So, for example, something that's worked really well is like I really wish more people realized. I can apply that to 500 different things, right?
Hmm,
And I used to have a series of carousels that just were like, you think, so for example, you think you're stuck, but here's what's really
hmm,
happening, kind of thing. Like, and you think you're lost, but here's what's really happening. You think you're this, but like, I
hmm.
can produce like 10 carousels with that basically. But that did really well. I don't think it would do so well right now. That was like 2 years ago, maybe. But like it did really well. And I was like, oh, this is really working for people. Well, let me just apply that to other emotions because like that's easy enough to do. So stuff, yeah. I think it's a consistent experimentation to answer your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. No, the absolute statements thing ties back to something that we were talking about earlier. I wonder if part of that is it gives people a chance to react and to become involved in the conversation. Because if you lay out too much nuance, then like it's kind of like yeah, no, this is all right. Like I hear what you're saying. It's effective, but there's not necessarily like a response needed. Whereas if you say this is how it is, then people can either be like yeah or no, you're so wrong. It doesn't leave space necessarily for other people to get involved in the conversation. Whereas if you're like super absolute, then there's tons of space for people to be involved where they're like, no, yes, maybe. That's perhaps what it is on the positive side. Maybe there's other negative reasons, but
No, I
that's
think
like
that's
a
absolutely what it is,
positive
and
framing.
it's probably both the positive and the negative within that, right? Because like as a human, you want to you would wish that people would like appreciate and resonate with or whatever with like a perspective that kind of like meets complexity, or at least I
Yeah.
as a human, right? Not everybody, but as a that's what I mean, like the separation between like real life and content creation, where there's probably like hooks that I will use as a content creator, where I'm like I understand this world and I make it a point to bring the nuance back in. And for example, I always have a disclaimer as well at the bottom of my caption where it's like, this is a social media post, like it can't possibly capture everything, like get real kind of thing. Um, but real life, I probably would never make a statement like that because I understand that it's not black or white. And a lot of my work is trying to get people out of black or white in many ways, you know? So I think that's, yeah, it's definitely why it works. And people, I guess the Instagram gurus will say like all engagement is great engagement, right? Like even if people go like absolutely not, you're wrong, like they're commenting and it's great engagement and the algorithm's gonna love it. But there's a part of like I guess integrity where you're just like, how do I play this? Where I'm like, I know, and also I hold myself to the standard of like I want to be at least somewhat close to like what's really there. But I've gotten like across the years, I think better and better at like embracing that first slide as like, all right, let's get it out there, and then just building the nuance in as we go.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's the social media world versus real world is a good way of framing that because it kind of is. It's like, yeah, of course I would never like be in a group of friends and be like, this is how it works. And you'd be like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you say that? But on the internet, that's how we talk. I mean, that's like kind of how the internet talks. Um, which that's a whole other discussion. We won't go there. But thanks for sharing everything with us. This is like super, super
Pleasure.
helpful. Where can people go follow you, kind of see your process and kind of
Easiest
work with you if
place
they're
is
interested?
to just find me on Instagram at the Mind Friend, and everything kind of trickles out from there. You could take the quiz if you're interested. It's in my bio as well. And then, yeah, everything else can be found there as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Charlotte. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.